So really, we are really excited basically to have gathered so much data. So thank you so much for working hard on this collaborative science project, which is hosted by us, but it's really fueled by you. So over the last few weeks, we took a deep dive together into our waste bins. And today we're going to take a deep dive into the data. But before we do, we just have a few housekeeping things as well as some review to put all of our hard work in context. So first, we just want to introduce ourselves and then acknowledge the land upon which we do our local work. So this time we have 3 hosts. So I'm your MC, and we'll also talk about the diversity of our waste streams. Rafaela will talk about the data from the surveys you have been taking in Google Forms, and Hannah will share the data about our waste. So quick introduction to me. My name is Chelsea Rockman. I'm one of the co-founders of the U of T trash team and also a researcher on microplastics. I've been working on the issue for quite some time. And today, as I said, I'll be your MC, sharing some information about the diversity of our waste streams. So before we begin, I'm going to turn it over to Rafaela for a quick introduction, and then Hannah.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Rafaela. I'm co-founder of the U of T Trash team. I'm program lead. I run the social science educational program, and I'm very happy to be here today. And thank you for being here with us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah DeFront. I am a member of the U of T Trash team, and I'm also a researcher at the University of Toronto studying microplastics. So I also did the data analysis for all of your data sheets that you submitted. So yeah, thank you again for submitting those, and the results are pretty interesting.
Okay, and just a quick reminder of who we are. So the U of T Trash team is basically a group of students and young scientists and early career researchers, as well as volunteers from within our community. Our mission is to increase waste literacy while reducing plastic pollution in our ecosystem. So this project is all around increasing waste literacy. We try to connect people and increase literacy about material consumption, waste with fun, creative, and practical actions. And we use education, public outreach, and scientific research to deliver evidence-based solutions to decrease solid waste and promote a more circular economy. And finally, before we begin, we feel it's important to recognize the history of the lands we call home. We are thrilled to have people joining from all over, and so we extend our acknowledgements to the Indigenous and traditional past across all territories. So for our team, we are here in Toronto, so we will speak to the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are really grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Okay, so before we show you the data, we wanted to give you all a quick reminder of why we are here. So just a quick reminder of our objectives. Our goals were to learn about the waste stream in the municipality where you live, meaning learn what bins you have, recycling, landfill, organics, and what goes in them. And 2, to decrease your waste footprint and divert waste away from your landfill by procuring and using products that you can either reuse or that go into other bins like your recycle bin. And the objectives of tonight are to show you the differences in waste management across the locations in which we're all seated, to share our survey results about waste behavior and literacy, and finally to share the results showing our self-reported waste habits over the last 4 weeks. So did we reduce? How did our waste habits shift? We will have Q&A. Sometimes they pop up throughout the webinar, but we'll also have it at the end. We encourage you to raise your hand by pushing the raise hand button in Zoom. We can then call on you and unmute yourself. You're also welcome to ask questions in the chat at any point. Okay, so we really just want to start with a reminder of why do we do this? So plastic pollution has become a problem. It's become a problem that's now evident across the world, and that's being held up on the global stage as an issue that we really need to focus our attention on. Today, we quantify and estimate that about 23 million tons of plastic waste enters the world's aquatic ecosystems, so this is rivers and lakes, every year, and that this might increase to up to 53 million tons by 2030. Once the plastic goes into the environment, we know that it doesn't compose, especially not in any fast fashion. It often breaks down into little bits of plastic called microplastic and persists and accumulates in the environment for a long time. We also know that once it gets there, it threatens wildlife, and this is a lot of what we work on in our lab at the University of Toronto. So today, our goal is to try to help increase waste literacy, understand more about our waste so that we can reduce it to ultimately help prevent more plastic pollution from going into our environment. When we think about the different ways in which we can prevent and mitigate plastic pollution, we tend to put them in 3 bins. One is reducing consumption, so that may be using less of the material that we have. And the other is waste management, more sustainable waste management so that the plastic isn't going into the environment. The third is cleanup. The waste audit really focuses on the first 2 on the front end, which ideally I think is a really good place to work because we would ideally eventually get to a place, we hope, where we don't need cleanup. Okay, so I'm going to start talking about where our participants were. So in this study, we have people from 3 countries. So we had people from England, the United States, and Canada. And this extends across 1 state and 2 provinces in Canada. So that's Oregon, Ontario, and Alberta. And within Canada, we had people from Toronto, Etobicoke, Caledon, Orangeville, Hamilton, and St. Albert. And within the US, we have somebody from Corvallis, Oregon. Within the UK, 1 person is from London, England. So in total, we span 3 countries and 8 cities with 20 people providing data for the Waste Management Survey. At first glance, these locations are not that different from each other, at least you wouldn't expect in terms of waste management. But let's see how different they really are, because waste management tends to actually be pretty diverse. So the first question, or one of the questions you answered, is what are the waste streams available in your neighborhood? So we wanted to see who had pickup for landfill, recycling, and compost. It's pretty common for all of us to have landfill waste curbside, so seeing this wasn't a huge surprise. We were really happy to see that everyone had recycling. This is fairly common in the parts of the world where we live, but not always for places like apartments and condo buildings or less urban areas. When it came to green waste, we had a few people that did not have it. Sometimes this is because you live in a condo building, you might actually have it and you could ask and see if you do. Other times the cities that you live in don't have it. Before I lived in Toronto, I never had green waste available. There were also a couple people that had other. This tend to be yard waste as well as large items that could be picked up outside of your house. So overall, where we live, we're really lucky. We don't have to go further than our house to keep waste out of our landfill or our environment. But this is not the case all over the world. Sometimes you have to drive your own recycling to a material recovery facility, which sometimes has a fee, a tipping fee, which can be a barrier. And in some cases, landfill waste is not even connected, making it or collected, making it a real challenge to manage waste sustainably. Then the next question we asked about is what are some of the differences in the waste management system in terms of what you can put in your bin? And here we're thinking about recycling. So what people can recycle was sorted by either the material type, the product type, or both. So generally, recycling markets are based on the type of material, but providing people with products likely makes it easier. So for example, it's easier to tell people to put bags in the bin or cutlery in the bin versus polyethylene or polyethylene terephthalate. But there are some exceptions and sometimes, and we'll talk about this right now, so I'll show you kind of the diversity of the different products that you can actually put in your bin. So here's 5 common products that people tend to use in the city. And underneath it tells you the number of participants that can recycle them in their city. So here you can see that for black plastic, even if it might be made out of the same material as a bag, or in this case, cutlery, cannot be recycled in any but 2 of the 20 cities. And this is often because in the waste management facility, they use a laser to sort the different types of plastic, and the laser absorbs the black material and they can't tell the difference. 14 out of 20 cities could recycle plastic bags. That's actually pretty good. 14 out of 20 could recycle styrofoam. Remember, if you can, it's really, really important that you clean all the food residue off of it. And no city could recycle straws, which this is pretty common. They're small, they fall through the cracks, they can harm the equipment. And 7 could actually recycle cutlery, which is sort of surprising because I think it's sort of similar to straws in this way. But here, as you can see, there's not much waste harmonization across cities. And for some of us, you might not expect us to be harmonized with England or London in England, but you might expect us to be harmonized with somewhere like Hamilton, which isn't that far from Toronto. So seeing these differences are really interesting. So before we show you more results, I have a question that I want to pose to you for you to put answers in the chat. And it's whether you think having a more harmonized waste stream, so where all of us could recycle the same thing or put the same thing in our different bins, whether you think that would help increase the recycling rate. Remember last time we met, Hannah told us that it's really only around 10%. And why do you think waste harmonization can help? So you can type in the chat or you can raise your hand and tell us what you think. And while you're thinking about it, I can tell you that right now in Canada, waste harmonization is something that they have been discussing in terms of our waste streams, at least across the province. And I believe in British Columbia, they do have a much more harmonized waste stream than we do here in Ontario. Does anyone have any ideas of why it would be helpful to have a harmonized waste stream across a province or state? So one of the reasons that we tend to think when we give, oh, we have an answer. Yeah, easier communications, exactly. One of the things I was going to say, we often give presentations around the community, particularly when we can in person. And one of the things we always hear is how frustrated people are between how different things are in different cities, how they feel like they can't understand what goes in which bin, and then it feels kind of hopeless. Deborah says it would be so much easier if you don't have to learn a new system for every neighborhood you visit or every neighbor you visit. Absolutely. And better peer-to-peer education too. Great. Awesome. Yeah. And Suzanne says it also might help if it was harmonized between states in the US too. And I agree. And within even maybe across provinces in Canada, then you can share, you can even share streams in terms of recycling markets, etc. So great. Okay. Then the next step is to share with you the survey results about waste behavior and literacy. So I'm going to turn it over to Rafaela.
Thank you, Chelsea. Over the next slides, I would like to share some results from the surveys you all replied. So first of all, thank you for participating in this survey and this research. We really appreciated your data. And one of the questions focused on whether you learn something new reading about your local waste streams and take the surveys. And I'm very happy to report that 95% of participants learned something new during this time. And we would love to share with you some of the comments. So some of the participants learned about their waste stream, where the different items go and information provided by the city. So one participant said, more things are recyclable than I thought. And the other two participants said the opposite. My recycling and food waste collection seems to collect less than I had imagined. And another affirmed, we are pretty limited in what we can recycle, really only plastics number 1 and 2. So here it's one more thing that depends on your point of view and how you manage your waste at home, you will see different things. So in terms of product, styrofoam was a common new learning for participants. One participant said, styrofoam can go into recycling in Toronto. And another participant from a province here in Canada learned that styrofoam can be brought to the recycling depot. Here, another learning from participants. Here, I just want to highlight why it's so important to check it out your local waste stream. For example, some participants learned that now paper towel is supposed to go in the garbage as a COVID-19 precaution. So that's a good exercise to regularly check your local waste stream information, so we can avoid putting our waste in the wrong bin. And because we know that the city, it's always changing, so it's smart to always try to check your local waste stream. So another result I want to share here, it's how many different changes all of you made throughout the waste audit. It's really amazing. And because the list is quite long, I will highlight only some of them. So let's have a closer look at the top 5 responses, and also we will look at the category others that's on the bottom of this graph. So 12 out of 15 participants looked for information on how to dispose your waste properly. And then 7 out of 15 upcycled or reused items that would otherwise go to waste, thrown items into the recycling bin that you previously would have put in the landfill bin, swapped a single-use plastic item for a reusable alternative, and reusable containers instead of disposable Ziploc bags. And now when we asked about others, the category others, one of the participants watched a video clip on waste reduction in the kitchen. Another walked to a further store to buy products without plastic packaging. Another participant stopped buying certain products, probably to avoid plastic packaging. And one of them had a in-depth conversation with family members regarding their consumption habits. And finally, one of the participants said that being more aware of the waste that they are producing. So here we can see that participants use different strategies to change their habits, and it's pretty interesting. Some of those changes were really easy and some of them more difficult. So we will start with the easiest one. And the easiest changes were remembering which bin to place items in and reusing, avoid single-use plastics, and repurposing items. So here are some of your answers on why were they simple changes. So remembering which bins to place items in become easier as I continue to continue the waste audit, one participant said. Or another participant said, once I learned what went where, it became second nature. Also, checking the information on the app or website was helpful and easy for some participants. As one participant affirmed, it's super easy to pull out my phone to check Toronto's waste wizard. So checking the information and remembering where to place your items, it is a practice. The more we practice, the better we get. And the participants, they start to see that. So here we have more answers and why were they simple changes. Some participants also found it easy to replace some products with less or no waste. Another participant said, because it depends only on me, did not have to change the behavior of others. So think about that. I have a question for you all. How was for you to involve another household member in your home waste audit? Was it difficult? Was it easy? What strategy did you use to have your family or your other household member involved during this process? You can type in the chat box, or you can save your comments at the end. But I will wait a couple of seconds for you to type. Yeah, it was hard to get them engaged. Can you, Ria, can you say why? If you want to share why it was difficult? Yeah, everyone's tired at the end of the day. Yes. Then to let me handle all the garbage. Yes, it's not an easy task. And I noticed that too when we tried the first one. But with more practice, it's getting easier. Keeping track on their garbage was hard and it was time consuming. Yes, for sure, it's time consuming. Yes, he was good at changing behavior. Thank you. It was easy. Okay, that's nice that you found that easy. My cat just went about his normal routine. Okay, thank you for sharing. Yeah, we will discuss more later after Hannah share her data. Okay, so now when we asked about the most difficult change you made throughout the waste audit, buy items with no or less packaging and avoid single-use plastics were the top 3 most difficult changes you made it. Another difficult change were also reported like buy items packaged in recyclable materials, reusing and repurposing items, and remember which bins to place items in. Interesting is that avoid single-use plastic was also reported by 3 participants as one of the easiest changes made. So yeah, that's an interesting data. And here are some of your answers on why was this the most difficult change. Some of the difficult changes were specifically related to COVID, where you can no longer fill up containers at bookstores, for example. Another change was the was the cost and not enough motivation. So one participant said it didn't seem to help. Another difficult change was related to find alternatives with less packaging. So one participant said, many of our usual items don't come in less packaging, or we found it challenging to buy items from the regular grocery store without plastic packaging. Or another participant said, not many options for unpackaged goods. And yes, and this is because among other factors, the regular grocery stores and industry, they play a big role on deciding the type of packaging they will sell. And it's hard for us to have options. So we asked another question was where you found tips to reduce waste, and the UFT Trash Team and other websites were the most common place for seeking information. So here, please, if you remember, type in the chat box what website you thought was useful. Maybe if we share more data here, more information, we will learn more, and other people can know about the website that you like it. You can share during the presentation. And the last information I want to share, it's your favorite waste reduction tip. I love this part. We have some favorite tip. One of participants said, we have some favorite tips related. We have some favorite tips related with reusing materials. So one participant said, reusing items for art, reusing the milk bag as a wrap, reuse toothbrush heads for cleaning, and also we finding alternatives for single-use products that can be reusable, so as the reusable menstrual product. So we have a different reusing alternatives. Another tip was the motivation. The statistic about 90% of materials being recycled pushed the participants to find more ways to reuse. Or all the steps before we put an item in the recycling bin. So refuse, rethink, reuse, and recycle tip. And speaking of refuse, reuse, recycle, we, the UFT Trash Team, we have created a video for kids about the solutions hierarchy, where we present all the steps with some solutions. So we discuss about refuse, rethink, reuse, recycle. It's on YouTube, and I think maybe we will share in the chat as well. It's very cute. It's for kids, but adults can watch it as well. It's only 5 minutes. And also the information about the wish cycle. So how bad wish cycle is. So yes, those are the waste reduction tips that you share with us. And thank you so much for sharing your favorite waste reduction tip. But before I pass over to Hannah, who will present the data from the waste audit, I would like to open for a quick question. So 94% of the participants who answered the survey would recommend the home waste audit. So why do you think home waste audit was helpful to you? You can chat on the, you can type on the chat, please. Okay, Hannah, it's the chat's quiet, so you can.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see if anyone said anything.
It was really eye-opening to see how much waste I produce. Yes. Mm-hmm. A sense of community that I'm not alone. Yeah, that's nice in my endeavor. Yes, made my kids much more aware of what they throw out daily. Yes, makes it easier to get them to try new waste reduction approach yourselves. Yes. That's one of my favorite things to do with my daughter. We always try to, before we throw something, we try to think about how to reuse or how to do art. We always do art and craft with waste. So yes, it made me more conscious of my waste usage. This experience really increased my awareness about my own waste output, as well as how big waste plastic is. Yeah, especially produced rapid in plastic. Yes, I understand. I made me realize how much I was throwing away and where I should focus my efforts on waste reduction. That's good for you, Jessica. That's awesome. Become more conscious of my recycling habits. Thank you, Leah, for sharing. It also prompted great conversation in my family and with my colleagues, which prompted some of other folks to think about their own waste output. Oh, that's nice. And Ashley, it was also good to have the commitment of the audit to make me take action. I have always been interested in reducing my waste, but it's easy to put off. Yes, that's amazing. Carrie, totally agree with the comments on the community and accountability. Oh, that's very nice. I'm glad you see this way. Okay, thank you. We will discuss more about that later. Let's Hannah present. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Rafa. Actually, some of these comments that you just mentioned are really interesting in relation to some of the next slides that I've got to show you. So we'll come back to those in a moment. But so for now, we've looked through all the survey responses, and I'm now going to go through the actual waste audit data itself. So this includes all the items that you all counted and noted down in your data sheets, and that was submitted to us. So thank you again for doing this, and the results are quite interesting. So we'll go to the first one. So within the survey, one of the first questions that we asked participants was how many items of trash do you estimate your household produces in 1 week? So this includes both landfill and recycling waste. And for this question, most respondents estimated that they threw away between 51 to 100 items per week. And then the rest of the responses were split between the higher end of the scale, up to over 150 items a week, to the lower end of the scale, which is below 50. So it's quite a broad range, but most people thought they were somewhere in the middle. But when we look at the actual data, the results are quite different. And I think this relates well to some of the comments that you all just posted about realizing how much you actually do throw away, because in contrast to the survey responses, most people threw away over 100, most households, I should say, threw away over 150 items per week when you add landfill and recycling waste together. So this means that most participants considerably underestimated the amount of waste they were throwing away. So it's easy to see why that might be. Yeah, wow, yeah. If you're not keeping track of your waste like we have been for the last few weeks, it's really easy not to realize all those little bits and pieces that you're throwing away each day. And also, I think, which has also been reflected in our discussions, is that if there's more than one person in the household, it's really difficult to know how much everyone else is throwing away in addition to yourself. So I think for some people who were filling in the survey in week 1, they were just estimating based on what they thought, but it's really difficult to actually know the truth. Suzanne, did the higher waste per household correlate with household size? We'll get to that in a few slides. Here's the overall results from our home waste audit. So the landfill waste is in black and recycling waste is in blue. And you can see pretty obviously that across the 4 weeks from this figure, this is average waste per household, by the way. So I've averaged across all the households that took part. When we can see in both bins, the waste didn't change very dramatically across the 4 weeks, but throughout landfill waste was higher. So it hovered around 70 to 72 items per week, but between week 1 and week 4, on average, households decreased their landfill waste by 2 items every week. And then the average number of recycling items actually increased between week 1 and week 4, but only by an average 1 item per week, so from 48 to 49. And this isn't necessarily a negative result because, as Chelsea mentioned at the start, one of our objectives was to throw less into our landfill and more into our recycling bins. So this is actually, we kind of anticipated a slight increase in the recycling, and this is, although it's small, it's definitely on the path of things that we would like, of the objectives of the home waste audit. So before I go on to the next slide, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. So why do you think total waste didn't change too much over the 4 weeks? And how do you feel about these results? Yeah, so Ashley just said, for me, the duration of the audit wasn't long enough to see change, which I think is very true. And I think that's something that we can take away from our audit. Both of our 2 audits that we've done now, it seems that 4 weeks is a good way to get going and get the information you need. But I think to make long, sustainable change, we'll need longer. There's less flexibility right now due to COVID, absolutely. More restricted in what you can and can't buy. Still going through items I purchased before or needed time to research alternatives. Yeah, for example, no bulk containers, absolutely. Some of the changes made were longer term changes. Yeah, I agree with that one. Most of our waste comes from food and we're all at home, but I personally thought it wasn't enough time. There were certain items at the grocery store that had plastic packaging and it had to either, oh, you have to stop eating it. Yeah, quit eating it, meat or snacks, or buy it anyway. Yeah, it's a difficult choice. If there's no alternatives, then you're pretty stuck in what you have to have. Yeah, hard to give up, can do. I feel that. Okay, these are all great responses and kind of what I was expecting as well from looking at these results. So we can go on to the next slide if we want to. Yeah, candy addicts. So as I said, the decrease in landfill waste is only 2 items on average a week between the 13 participants or households that participated. And I feel like it does sound like quite a small amount, but considering we had 13 households, collectively by week 4, we were generating around 26 less landfill items a week. And then if you multiply that over the course of 1 year, if we all just reduced our landfill waste that amount, we would equate to over 1,000 less items getting sent to landfills every year. So for people trying to make individual changes, I feel like sometimes there's a feeling that they're small changes and on an individual level it might not make a difference. But if we think about, if we expanded that further than the 13 households which we have data for, if there was a whole community or even a whole country just decided to decrease their landfill waste by 2 items a week, the difference would be huge over the course of a year. So it's pretty interesting to kind of think about it on a longer scale, which I hope that we'll all continue this on a longer scale as well, time scale. Okay, so far I've shown you the average across households, but interestingly, if we separate out results for each household individually, we can see just how big some of these differences are. So this figure just shows the 4-week average across households. And I did this because obviously the results didn't change too much, so we didn't need to compare massively between the 4 weeks. So the different bars indicate the different bins. So black is the landfill bin and recycling is the blue bin. Sorry, that's just what I was thinking about, because in Toronto, our landfill bin is black and the recycling bin is blue. So I color coded them that way. So the blue is the recycling. And then the height of the bars is the number of waste items on average that everyone threw away every week. And you'll see along the bottom is all the households, and I have anonymized them for the purpose of this presentation. But if you have a look, you might be able to work out which household you are. But you don't need to share it if you guess it. This is just for fun, so you can have a look and see how everyone compared. And you can see that there was quite a few differences between the households. So some households, if you total recycling and landfill waste, were producing up to 235 items a week. And then on the opposite end of the scale, we have some households producing as low as 45 items per week in both recycling and landfill, which is quite interesting in what the differences will be in what they're throwing away. So we haven't had time yet to look into the data and dig in and see if we can work out what differences there were between what these households were throwing away or what they were throwing in their trash. But it will be interesting, and I'm quite excited to see the reasons why. So yeah, you can see there's huge differences. Okay, and then the next, if we go even deeper into the results, we can go into trash per individual, waste you throw away per individual, because obviously we asked you to note down on your data sheets how many members of your household there were, including pets, which count as half a person, but no offense to your pets. It's just they don't produce as much waste as a human. So this is the 4-week average per person. So it does actually look quite different compared to the per household figure. So individual waste generation ranges from 26 to 68 items per week. So it's still, again, quite a broad range. And you can see that looking at some households, they actually produce more recycling waste per individual than landfill, and vice versa. So I think this means that some households with less people were throwing away more trash per person. So this kind of demonstrates why it's important for us to look at these results with a bit of a finer tooth comb. So on average, we threw away 30 items per person into the landfill bin, and then we threw away 21 into the recycling bin. So I just want to ask as well, if you can type into the chat, how do you feel about these numbers? So a total of around 50, like on average 50 items a week, mostly landfill bin. Do you think it's low, or do you think it's quite high, or is it what you'd expect? Too high. Yeah, I think it's quite good. I mean, I think it depends on what you thought it would be, I guess. If you had low expectations, then it's much higher than you thought you were throwing away. Then I think it could be quite shocking. But I think on average, this is probably lower than most people. Deborah's worked out which household she is. I actually don't know. So yeah, people are shocked. Yeah, it can be, it is quite shocking. I think it's just, yeah, it's one of those things that we just don't think about on a day-to-day basis. And then when you have the figures in front of you, it can be, yeah, it can be shocking. Yeah, interesting. I also think, which we can come back to later, but it was mentioned in our first webinar that there's possibility that we might have recruited people for the home waste audit that were already interested in reducing their waste and were already aware of their plastic footprint and trying to reduce their use of and they're trying to recycle more items. So we might have some bias there from that. But I agree. I think on the whole, people would probably think that's too high. But it's highly dependent on household. Okay, so if we look in landfill waste a little bit deeper, you'll remember that on the data sheets, we asked you to categorize your items as plastic, paper, metal, glass, mixed materials, or other. Within the landfill waste, you can see from this chart that by far the most common item thrown away was plastic, which is in green. and that stayed around an average of 33 items per week. Again, this is the average across all households. So when you look at that figure, all the other material types kind of pale in comparison to the average amount of plastic waste that's going in our landfill per household. And all of the other categories have around 15 items per week or less. But one thing we did expect, in addition to a lot of plastic in our landfill bin and a fair amount of paper, was a number of mixed materials, which is the orange line on the figure. So the mixed materials seem to be quite common in the landfill bin, and they were things like snack food or chip bags, which are often a mixture of aluminium and plastic lined together. And these two things can't be separated for recycling, so they have to get sent to landfill. And then another common item in the mixed materials class was dryer sheets or makeup wipes. And these are interesting, and I'm kind of glad that many of you identified these as mixed materials, because although they seem to be paper tissues at first glance, these type of wipes are often made of plastic, such as polyester or polypropylene, and in particular for makeup wipes, once they've been used, they can't be recycled, so nor should they be flushed down the toilet as well. So it's interesting, and it's good that you're all putting them in your landfill bin. So yeah. But before I go to the next slide, I just want to hear some of your guesses about what items you think might have been most popular or most common in the landfill waste bin. So what do you think was the cause of all the non-recyclable plastic? Does anyone have any guesses? Lids? Yeah, plastic lids. Food packaging. Anyone else? Agreed, food packaging. Yeah, Chelsea's just given you all a hint. Says that this item was the #1 item collected on beaches this year around the world in the International Coastal Cleanup. It was plastic food packaging. You've all guessed it. So yeah, these are just there was a lot of different items that were submitted, so I kind of grouped a lot of them together. But a large proportion of the items in the plastic category in the landfill data sheets was different types of plastic packaging, from clamshells to like wraps around like fruit and vegetables, or things that like salad bags and things like that. So I lumped all those things together, and there was a huge amount of plastic packaging in the recycling. So this is a word cloud, just to show some of the top items recorded in the landfill waste. So the bigger the word is on the page, the more commonly it was recorded. So in week 1, we threw away collectively between the 13 households just under 300 food packaging items. And this was closely followed by tissues and paper towels. There was 85 tissues in week 1 that were thrown away, and obviously for many of us they're now going in our landfill bin rather than our organic. So interesting. And some of the other items, oh sorry Chelsea, stay on that one for a second. So one of the other common items included in the landfill waste bin that were really popular were mixed packaging, floss, paper towels, produce stickers, and dog poop bags. So yeah, okay, we can go to the next one now. So then if we go to recycling waste, the most common item throughout the waste audit was actually paper, which is interesting, and that hovered at a household average around 25 items per week. And it's quite like nice to see that the top item wasn't plastic in the recycling, but plastic items were approximately half that of in landfill waste. So in landfill it was around 13, in the recycling the plastic items are around 14 items per week. So this might be something that shows the bias I mentioned earlier. So it's highly likely that some of us are already thinking about our plastic use, and I might have already made changes to buy items that come in paper or cardboard packaging instead. But I know that's not true for everyone, but it might have affected these results. And then you can see on the lower end of the scale for recycling waste was glass and mixed materials and other as well. And again, the mixed materials category here was not that surprising, because as we know, many of the mixed materials that we use and have can't be recycled because the two different materials can't be separated. So the majority of these entries that were able to be recycled were Tetra packs and things like that, and drinks cartons, which I know can be recycled in Toronto, and I assume they can be recycled in other locations as well. So before we go to the next slide, does anybody have any guesses about the top item in the recycling waste? Suzanne has to send them to TerraCycle. Cardboard box, yeah. Yeah, so we know the top item was paper. The most common items were paper. So it's interesting to see. Paper towel rolls, yeah. Okay, so again, the top item was overall plastic packaging, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was the highest. It just means there was loads of things in that category. And the reason why all the other words are there but not quite as large on this word cloud is because, yeah, I grouped everything together depending on what it was. And it turned out that although there was a lot of paper waste in the recycling, it was much more varied. So you can see on here, there's cardboard boxes, there's flyers, envelopes, toilet paper rolls, things like that. Lots of different types of cardboard and paper and packaging. So it's much more varied, which is interesting. So it's not just one culprit, but I guess if you lump them all together, it would kind of be cardboard packaging and then pieces of paper. Yeah, and plastic packaging was still quite high on this list, which is very interesting. So I think it's kind of obvious now that plastic packaging seems to be something that particularly now many people struggle to avoid. And this is also clear, as Rafa showed in the survey responses, a lot of you said that it was difficult to find items with no packaging or less packaging, particularly plastic. So I think it's interesting that the split seems to be some is recyclable, some is not. And it might be one of those things that is difficult for us as individuals to change if there's not those options out there. And it might be something that the companies that produce those products should be thinking about as well, in terms of if packaging is required for certain reasons to contain a product, it should be designed to be recyclable. Okay, so we're nearly out of time. We've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to stop here and I'm going to hand it back over to Chelsea. But I hope you've enjoyed the results, and it's I hope it's been interesting for you all. So I'll hand it back over now.
Okay, thank you, Hannah and Rafaela. So just quick in summary and wrap up. So one thing we're really happy to see is that people felt like they learned something new. So it seemed worth it to take the dive in, and that you got something out of it, which we also saw in the chat. So that's great. Our waste streams are diverse, even among neighboring cities. That's something that, even though I know this, still shocks me to this day. And learning our waste streams and reusing materials might have been simple, but buying products with less packaging is tough, and buying products with packaging, if we must, that is recyclable, is also not easy. And we also see, as you said, that most people might need longer than 4 weeks to change their waste habits, and that's totally okay. We wanted to share a few pictures that we took from social media that you shared, people typing in their data feverishly so they could share it with us. Some of the types of plastics people realize that they might not have thought about before is like, this thing, now I have to count it as I put it in my waste. And then really creative ways to reduce and create products that are reusable. This one, I can't remember who made this. I think it might have been Jess, but very cool. I want one. For everybody who did participate, we did make certificates. You're more than welcome. We are going to email them to you. You can print them, hang it on your fridge, or you can choose not to print them so that you don't have to put it in your waste bin later, or maybe you can make art on the back. However you want to use your certificate is up to you, but we wanted to give you something to keep with you as a keepsake. And also, of course, remember that waste reduction doesn't have to stop here. So although our data collection went for 4 weeks, your waste reduction can continue. And so we continue to have tips on our website. We share them on social media. And as you all noticed, there's lots of great resources online for you to go to as well. And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining tonight, but most importantly, thank you for participating. It's really great for us to be able to collect this data this time because we had the actual waivers in the beginning. This is data that we can publish and share in publication. We will also create a report for the website that we will share to you so you can see everyone's data. Of course, everything's anonymous. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to ask. Don't forget that you have a follow-up survey coming up in early April. And so that's to see what habits have stuck. So what was easy for sticking and what was a little bit difficult. So stay tuned for an email on that, and then feel free to follow us on our website for upcoming events. We will have something for Earth Day, and we'll also have our first socially distanced cleanup in May for the Ontario Day of Action Against Litter. It's new and hard to say. But we do want to make sure we have time for Q&A, so it's not quite 8 yet. So for anyone who has a question, please feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat, and we would love to answer any questions. And for those of you that have to depart, thank you so much for coming, and it was great to see you. Any questions? Ashley.
Hi, thanks a lot. I was really excited to see the data. It was really fun. I have a few questions, but I'll ask one first, and then I'll let other people ask questions, and then I can come back to me. You can come back to me later.
No problem.
So I'm hoping to get some tips either from you guys at the trash team or from anybody else who maybe also did the waste audit about how to store things that you want to keep to reuse, like for art projects or whatever, when you have small space. So like I live in an apartment or a basement apartment in Toronto. I share my space with a roommate. So I basically like all of my things have to stay confined in one room. So it gets very cluttered very fast. So like how do you kind of deal with this disconnect of like I want to reuse things, but like things take up space?
That is a good question. Does somebody want to take a stab at answering that? Does anyone have tips and tricks for this?
I don't have any really good tips or tricks, but I have the same issue. I have a small space and I tend to keep things thinking that I'll reuse them. I ended up throwing away. I had like a collection of jars which I'd hoarded for a long time to reuse as like containers to store food in and things like that. But I think, yeah, it's a balance between keeping it and knowing you're going to use it for something and just keeping it because you don't want to throw it away. That's my problem.
And depend on the item, you can also donate it. There is a group, Toronto Zero Waste Toronto, I think, on Facebook, and they are always asking for jars, glass, or containers, plastic containers. So maybe you can donate it, keep it, and then donate it to someone else. They use for variety of things, like for planting or even for putting food in different containers. So yes, you can check the Facebook group if you want to. Thank you, Suzanne.
Rafaela Carey's asking, what is the name of that organization again?
I think Zero Waste Toronto. It's a Facebook group if you are in Toronto.
Ashley, do you want to ask another question?
Yes, sorry, I had muted myself and then I had navigated away to type something and then couldn't find Zoom again.
No
but yes, sorry, I have like a bunch of questions. So one question I have about dealing with residue, like I know you have to clean recyclables, which I do, but certain food products stain, like especially like tomato sauces and things like that. And like they'll stain like permanently. Does that make something unrecyclable?
What is your question? Sorry.
If something stains, Yeah, I think if it has food residue and you can't get it off, so for a good example of this is like styrofoam takeout containers. If you get something oily and greasy, if you really
Yeah.
can't clean it off, it can't be recycled because this is, to the best of my understanding, it's mechanical recycling. So it's just cleaned, chopped up, and it's like regrind and then melted back into product. So if it's like hard to clean, it's often goes to landfill.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's just kind of a bummer.
It's a bummer. I know. It's like the black plastic. It's like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I try always to put it my recycling in the sink, inside the sink. So if I'm washing my dishes, my recycling will be washed with the water that I'm washing. So at least I try to clean. If it's not possible, then it's garbage. But
Ashley, you want to go for another one?
Sure. I was gonna ask for your guys' thoughts on the new Loop grocery chain or grocery store or whatever that just opened up in Ontario.
I'm actually excited about it, but I haven't tried it yet, so I can't say that I've tried it. I'd like to. It's TerraCycle is the same company who I think Suzanne mentioned they send recyclables to. We send our cigarette butts to for cleanups. We'll see how it works. Anyone else have opinions? Has anyone tried it?
I haven't yet. The cost is like a little.
Yeah.
You kind of, especially because like, you have to spend a certain amount to get free shipping, which is what I always do, but they have limited selection right now. So it's like, gotta wait until I need like olive oil.
Right.
yeah,
It is unfortunately expensive sometimes to be more sustainable. Like to shop at zero waste or low waste grocery stores tend to be more expensive, which is too bad.
It is.
Yeah.
I think that's a good in beginning. And I hope that we will open for more discussions, but I agree. I think it's out of the reach of the most of people. We cannot afford to be zero waste or less waste because it's too expensive in some case. So I hope they will have more options in the future. So now they have only Häagen-Dazs that I like this ice cream, but I cannot afford to buy every week or every 2 weeks. So I hope they will have more selection and other grocery stores starts to do the same, but I assume that will take time.
And Ashley, I think soon, as time progresses, they are going to be in store. I think they did announce that. So, but yeah, totally valid as of now.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for it to be in store, provided that it'll be in a store close to me. Because I think it's all President's Choice stuff, right?
Yeah, I think it's Loblaws.
This is kind of old news, but Bear Market is really neat. Like I just discovered Bear Market on the Danforth, and I had them deliver some food and some like toiletry stuff, some like silk floss, and everything was like delivered in paper. It was really cool. Alternative.
I could like catapult a rock from my backyard and it would land on their door. That's how close I live to Bear Market.
Do you like it? Is it a good system?
Yeah. No, I've been impressed. And Dana, the woman who started it, started out with a reusables program at the farmer's market. So she started on the farmer's market and then expanded into a store. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Success story. Yeah.
I guess I do have a question. Compostable bags for compost. I've read something somewhere that said it doesn't matter that those bags don't get compost. They just get spun in some kind of machine, and then all of the compostable bags and the plastic and everything just gets scooped out. So then I was just like, am I wasting my money buying these special compostable bags when it doesn't matter and I just put it in the old plastic bags that I have? Do you guys know anything about that?
Yeah, unfortunately, in the city of Toronto, you are wasting your money by spending more on the compostable bags. Yeah, we don't have an industrial composting facility here. We have it's more like an anaerobic digester to the way that I understand it. It doesn't get up to high enough heat to compost, like to break down that bag. So all the plastic bags float up to the top, they scrape them out, and they go to landfill. So any of that like PLA compostable material in Toronto goes to landfill.
That's too bad, but I'm glad I know that now.
Yeah, you can save some money. Yeah. Any other question? Yeah.
I've heard somewhere too that if we're composting appropriately, then our garbage should be dry, and in which case we don't really need to line a bin with a plastic bag. You could just dump the loose landfill waste right into the large bin for collection, which I think is great. But then I think I've also seen that the city of Toronto requires that garbage gets bagged. Is that the case?
Yeah, they won't take it otherwise. I've actually tried.
Did you?
Leave it. Yeah, leave it.
They just didn't take
the
it?
reason, actually. If Jamie, are you still on? Jamie might know the reason why you have to bag it.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, ladies. Yes, so there's some companies that are eliminating bags. That's the goal ultimately, is that our garbage is dry enough. Food waste and organic waste is everything that makes garbage gross. If we got rid of food waste out of our garbage, then we would have a lot cleaner materials that could sit there for months and not cause a problem. No smell, no pests, that sort of thing. There are some companies like Waste Management that are now eliminating bags from recycling, but for municipalities, it's a bit harder. One of their goals, aside from sustainability and recycling and all of that, is containment. They have to be able to contain the materials from getting out into the environment. So that's one of the things that they're working with. So we still have bags now, and I work for Wasteco. I work for another waste hauler in Southern Ontario, and we're trying to eliminate bags where we can. But one of the issues we face is in a 30-story building, let's say, how do we get waste and organics and recycling from the 30th floor all the way down? So there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of things that we're working out. But what you heard is correct, and it's something that's being worked on. And fingers crossed we get closer to that, because plastic bags are the devil.
Thanks, Jamie. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for staying on. Really appreciate you participating in this one. We will probably do it again. You may not want to do it again, but if you do, you're more than welcome. But please keep an eye on our upcoming events. We would absolutely love to see you all again in the future, and have an excellent rest of your week.